rather than saying, well, there's this bad guy we have to get rid of, or this terrible policy, that rather to say we have to have healthy habits, healthy culture, a healthy way of looking at the world, that we have to start, from the great learning, the dashui, right? You have to first cultivate your mind to understand yourself and the world. You have to bring harmony to your family. Then you have to, that leads to the regulation of the country, and that brings peace to the world, the Ping Tianxia, right? To the world. And so that order, starting with the self, to the family, to the country, and to the international community, I think is very, very powerful. What I learned from the Chinese tradition.
This is Find Joy with Joanne Season 2, where joy gets stronger, our community gets bigger, and together we become better versions of ourselves in a world full of limitless possibilities. I'm your host, Joanne Chan. And every Wednesday, we bring you inspiring stories that will light up your soul, powerful message that will make you go wow, and fun conversations that will crack you up with me and my special guests and friends. And it's my personal mission to empower you to live and lead a life with joy. If you are new here, this podcast is for you if you are looking for more joy, courage, passion, and purpose in your life. We dive deep into mindset mastery, spirituality, love and relationship matters, and how to manifest more success and abundance in all aspects of your life, however that looks. This podcast has got your back every step of the way. Now, without further ado, get ready to laugh, learn, and live your life to the fullest. Our guest today is an American professor, director, and polyglot who is an international relations expert and serves as the president of the Asia Institute, a think tank with offices in Washington, D.C., Tokyo, Seoul, and Hanoi. He's also a senior fellow at the Global Peace Foundation, where he strives to solve geopolitical tensions in Northeast Asia. He was briefly an independent candidate for President of the United States 2020 and trained as a scholar of Asian studies. He writes on both East Asian classical literature and current issues in international relations and technology in multiple languages. So guys, help me welcoming the President of the Asia Institute, Emanuel Pastreich. Thanks for joining us today.
It's a great honor to be with you.
For people who don't know, so we were speaking in Chinese earlier. It's a funny story. So yeah, anyway, he can speak Chinese and you can speak Korean, Japanese. So tell us a bit about your background and what led you to pursue a multifaceted career.
Right. Well, in terms of Asia, I happened to go to high school in San Francisco in the United States, and I had a lot of Asian friends from high school. Then when I went to college, I was a Chinese major and went to Taiwan, and then graduated. I ended up studying Japanese and spent many years in Japan, and eventually was professor of Japanese studies. And along the way, I also learned Korean and ended up teaching Korean for 12 years. So that was the process. But it was both about my interest in Asian culture, but also a feeling that Asia was very important for the United States. And I was very concerned because I felt that we had so many important figures in America who didn't really know Asia at all. Even Asian experts, they couldn't speak Asian languages, they couldn't read newspapers. And so I thought we really needed to sort of get up to speed in the United States.
Why do you think Asia is so important for the United States?
Well, the United States is increasingly dependent on Asia in terms of technology, in terms of manufacturing, but also, of course, finance and the whole range of aspects of contemporary society. Asia as a whole, I mean, China, Japan, and Korea each play their specific roles. But it also extends to Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia have become increasingly important, as have Mongolia or Uzbekistan or other countries as well. So we really need for the United States to make that shift in a way. It's similar to what happened in Japan and China in the late 19th century. The shift to suddenly wake up and recognize the importance of Europe, of the European culture, and now it's the reverse. So that was my point at the Asia Institute, and of course in the run for the presidency to say that we have to know Asia well, that it's important to be able to actually speak the languages, understand the culture, because that's our future.
Right. So you see, although I'm not in US right now, but I do have plans to move over to US in the future. So I heard that the thing is when I watch a lot of YouTube like videos online and they talk about the racism over there, they are against Chinese, Asian America. So what steps do you believe are necessary to combat those systemic, I would say, discrimination against Asian Americans in employment, in education, and other sectors?
Well, it's an extremely serious issue, and it has, of course, a history. In the 19th century, basically, there was what was called the China Exclusion Act, which limited immigration to the United States. And I mean, most Americans look like me, right? Because my ancestors came from Eastern Europe in the between 1890s, my father's side, to 1910. But that was because immigration from Asia was blocked, right? But if it had not been blocked, America would already be largely a mix of Asia. It was intentional blocking immigration in the 19th century. And we see similar, the term we use is it's called yellow peril, right? That was the term used in the 19th century, that somehow the culture of China or of Asia was alien, that it was a threat. And I see the exact same language used again. Really very sad to see that. And also very tragically, I've met many, say, Korean Americans or Japanese Americans, or for that matter, Japanese and Koreans in Asia, and they'll say something like, "Oh, well, we're not Chinese, we're Japanese or Koreans, and we'll be with you against China." But this is a profound misunderstanding because in the American culture and society, people they don't distinguish between Japanese or Koreans and Chinese, and attacks on Chinese affect how Koreans or Japanese or Vietnamese are perceived. So we really have to recognize first the contribution to world civilization of Asia and the Chinese tradition, and to take it seriously, in at least at the level we look at the Western tradition, and to recognize that in education and in science, in culture, that Asia is playing a major role in the world. And just like China in the late 19th century had to wake up to England and France and Germany and the United States, now the opposite, the United States and Europe has to wake up and realize the world has changed.
Mm. So you mentioned something really important. I believe that is the reason why there's such discrimination, because we feel like China is taking over the world, right? And Americans feel like there's a threat, right? And so which is why. So as a president of the Asia Institute, can you elaborate on the core mission of Asia Institute and the impact that you aim to achieve?
Right. So the purpose of Asia Institute, which has been active not just in the United States, but also in Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. We've also done events in China as well, is to attempt to objectively present Asia without a bias, and to assume that, say, the West or the United States can learn from Asia, not just lecture, right? Say lecture Chinese or Koreans and say, well, maybe if you work hard, you can be a democracy in the future, or you can be an advanced country. But rather to say the United States specifically has a lot to learn. We have serious problems in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of our society, the gap in wealth, the problems of education. I don't think that everything is perfect in China, but there's certainly an enormous amount we can learn. And also, another part of Asian students is, of course, cooperating. So, on the issue of education, I would not say that Americans should just imitate, say, Chinese or Japanese education, but rather that we should look at traditional education in Asia, which offers many models for education, which is not the same as what's being practiced today in Asia. And traditional education with the stress on moral content of education, a stress on learning the history and one's sense of oneself, about expression, learning to write well, to have a vision for what one's purpose in life is, that this is extremely critical part of traditional Asian education. It's not necessarily what you're getting today in Japan or China and Korea, but there's two aspects, right? One is learning what's good or what's to be learned from in contemporary Asia, and the second is what in the great tradition, say the great Chinese tradition, we can learn from that goes back for the last 2,000 years. How did the Ming Dynasty
Yeah.
run its government, right? What was the approach to diplomacy of the Chosun Dynasty in Korea? How did the shogunate in the Edo period in Japan, how did it establish local government systems? There's an enormous amount of wealth of know-how
Mm.
in the Asian tradition, which is basically unknown in the West.
Yeah, even unknown to me as well, maybe because I didn't study hard in school.
Well, this is also another aspect of it is that it's not just for us ignorant Westerners, but it's also, as you
Mm.
know, many people in say whether in China or Japan, Korea, or Southeast Asia, they have been taught to sort of it's a crisis in a way of culture because the idealized sort of Western model, Western
Yeah.
fashion, Western food, studied at Harvard. But we've reached a crisis because it's clear that the institutions and the culture in, say, Europe and the United States is not what it was before. And it's in many ways it's failing. We see this. My activity in the election, the presidential election in the United States, is represents that in a way because here people in Asia are looking at the United States, which was a model for many years, and you have this election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who are they remind me of the end of the Soviet Union when it was all these old men, but actually the old men at the end of the Soviet Union were younger than Donald Trump and Joe Biden. These are really in their 70s and 80s. So this tells us that there's something is profoundly wrong in the United States, and the answer to it is not to say, well, China's great or Japan's great because they're not great either, but to say, what can we find in the best of the sort of Eastern civilization and the best of the Western civilization, which can inspire a new generation of leaders like yourself, or maybe I would hope someone like myself, to move beyond. Because I really have been very frustrated that if I have a choice between the United States today and Japan or China, it's like an impossible choice. I don't want to have to make that sort of choice. I want to say we can create a new healthy civilization in both places.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you were the president, then I would, I would definitely vote for you. But of
Well,
course,
for me, well, I guess I have the Malaysian vote and Singapore vote.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I want to go back to your story a little. So, growing up, were there any significant events or particular events or moments or role model? Because you are so passionate about Asian cultures and all and history, right? And you're so right because today I believe, even in Singapore, for example, are so westernized, right? And it's not really an Asian country to me. It's like so westernized. It's a global financial center. So, I think we have lost it, right? The culture and everything. So growing up, were there any particular moments or role model that you look up to, and that's why you're so passionate and curious about the work that you're doing today for social change and
well, in a way, it wasn't necessarily so much. Uh, I mean, there were professors that I met in, say, Taiwan or in Japan when I was studying in my master's degree in Japan, uh, who inspired me. But maybe more than that, it was the historical figures in Asia, uh, who I was more inspired. So. If you, like for the debate in the Song Dynasty between Wang Anshe and Sima Guang about the nature of good government, and I think that actually Northern Song Dynasty was in the way the high point of civil society and transparent government. In some ways, I think it surpassed many things that we find in the West in terms of its accountability. Uh, and so that was very inspiring for me. The particular individuals in the Ming Dynasty, for example, the Dongling Academy, which during the period, especially from the Wanli Emperor on,
mm,
was opposed to corruption within government. And there were many very, very, I mean, they were scholars, right? So they learned the classics. They were very good at writing and expressing themselves, understood policy very well, but they were willing to go uh, against the corrupt officials to the emperor and speak the truth about what was wrong in the Ming Dynasty, even if they knew they risked their lives, and many of them lost their lives or were sent away into the countryside for their whole lives. But there was a sort of a moral bravery in the say the in the Dongling Academy, for example, in the late Ming. This was very inspiring to me, especially because when I look at the United States, I didn't see any politicians like. And this is true in the Chosun in Korea as well. Chosun had many of these brave intellectuals. So they were both scholars, right? They knew the classics, they're good writers, but they were interested in policy and about how to make a better country and work very hard. And they were totally fearless. That if they felt strongly about it, they would say, whether it's in the Ming or in the Chosun, they would say to the king or the emperor, this is the truth. This is the policy issue without any concern for their own well-being, willing to risk everything. And I wouldn't say this is not all Chinese, not all Koreans like that, but there was a tremendous, powerful tradition in China and Korea, especially, of that sort of committed intellectual.
yeah, interesting. Actually, personally, I have not um visited Korea or Japan, and but I would love to, one day. So,
I hope you can. I hope you
yeah, I
can.
will, I will, because I know you're in Japan right now, right? So, maybe I can meet you there. So,
That would be great. That would be great.
yeah, but I don't
Um,
speak Japanese, and you do. That's
没
interesting.
问题，我帮你翻译. I'll
Yeah,
be happy to translate for you.
yeah. So, what would you say is the most difficult language that like, is it the Korean,
Uh,
is it Japanese, or is
well,
it Chinese?
I think it has to do with age. I mean, I started Chinese basically teaching myself as a freshman in college. So I was like 18. Japanese when I was a senior, so I was like 20, 20, 21. I already studied Chinese for a while. But Korean, I was already in graduate school. I was 31 years old. So although I lived in Korea for the longest time, 12 years, I never got the same ability uh, I couldn't watch TV and follow it. It was just, even though I lived there a very long time, it was just too late in life. However, I give talks in all three languages. Uh, Probably Japanese is the easiest for me, but and I've written books in all three languages. I have four books in Chinese. I have four books in Japanese, and I have eight books in Korean. So,
Yeah, nothing, no books in English, so
oh, well, I've given a lot of speeches, of course, in a political sense over the last 4 years, and I think this I would really want to stress the importance of that. When I give talks in for American audience, I'm not talking about Asia. I'm talking about American issues, American society and culture. But it is an Asian approach that's saying rather than saying, well, there's this bad guy we have to get rid of or this terrible policy, that rather to say we have to have healthy habits, healthy culture, a healthy way of looking at the world, that we have to start, from the great learning, the dashui, right? You have to first cultivate your mind to understand yourself and the world. You have to bring harmony to your family. Then you have to that leads to the regulation of the country, and that brings peace to the world, the Ping Tianxia, right? To the world. And so that order, starting with the self, to the family, to the country, and to the international community, I think is very, very powerful. What I learned from the Chinese tradition. And so I'm not talking about China when I'm talking to Americans, but there is a certain Confucian aspect to it, of this sense of my moral responsibility, that I got this very good education, and that is not free. It gives me a moral obligation to society, and that's precisely what Confucius and Mencius, about Kongzi Mengzi, what they talked about was this moral obligation that comes. That learning is not just about getting into a good school and making a lot of money. It comes with a moral obligation, but
mm,
that's been lost a lot in China and of course Asia as well. Even if they call themselves Confucian, much of that tradition, I think, has it's not as central, I would say, but it could be central.
yeah. And just so you know, we do have a big audience in America as well. So they are Americans listening to you right now. So so yeah. What are you currently working on right now? What are some of the exciting projects that you are working on right now?
Well, I mean, the main thing for me these days has been about America and the future of the United States. So after I left the Green Party, I continued on as independent candidate, and I give speeches on important issues. I talked about the Equal Rights Amendment and the rights of women today in a speech, and I talked, I mean, the whole variety of different topics. So I try to address contemporary American issues. However, I don't blame any one person. I don't try and give some simplistic answer, and I certainly don't want to blame immigrants or blame, black people or something like that. I want to say that we have to look at the larger structure of our society and how we have moved away from the original vision for the Constitution, the the Republic. I mean, it's in some ways it is similar to the Confucian idea that there are these invisible principles, and that what's really has gone wrong in American politics. Well, several things, but one of them is we're so obsessed with what's visible, right? You can see things, right? So you see it, therefore it's real. But
Mm.
the invisible things, which is like morality, goodness, kindness, responsibility, the invisible things are so much more important than the visible aspects of society. So that really is it's a very different than American politics so far. So in that respect, it's an Asian approach to politics. But I don't say it's Asian, but I think you could see that.
Yeah, I could see that because I'm Asian, but because it's obvious to me, right? And so yeah, so since we have a global audience here, before we end, do you have any what's your I would say what would you like to leave them with? What is your message to our audience today
Well, so we're
globally?
talking to a global audience, and I would say the problems we face today, the way that say technology is out of control, is lack of responsibility felt by so many people, that this really are moral and cultural problems, and it's the whole world. We all have to work together to create a healthier and better society. it starts with oneself. As Hillel the elder said, if not now, when? If not me, who? Right. So that's really the moral imperative that we all have.
I love that. If not now, when? If not me, who? Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, thank you so much for coming to our podcast today. Now, tell my listeners where they can learn more about you, and if they want to connect with you, where do they go?
Right. So I have a blog, circles and squares.asia. And then I have, of course, my website. You can probably just Google my name and you'll get for the campaign, Emanuel Pastreich 24.org. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody. I really feel that we have to be global in our perspective. All of you make an enormous difference. In fact, it's the only way we can change things is through our daily behavior.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to change the world, we have to change ourselves first, right? And how do we change ourselves? One day at a time. All right, guys, I will put all the links and resources that we have for you today in the show note below. So make sure you visit the show note and connect with him. And thank you so much again for joining us today. Remember to subscribe to this channel on YouTube so you get access to more exclusive interviews like we had today. Thank you so much for listening, and I wish you all a joyful and amazing day ahead. Thank you again for tuning into 5JoyJoanne podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, take a screenshot and share it on your IG story and tag 5JoyJoanne_podcast so I know you are listening. And leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already done so. And remember to hit the subscribe button whether you are listening on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, or any of your other favorite platforms. If you love what we are doing and want to become one of our sponsors, you can send me a DM to connect. And thanks for being here. I will see you soon in the next episode.